The graduation. The Galactic Military Academy's graduation ceremony was proceeding exactly as planned, which meant it was boring enough to make a quantum physicist cry. Standing at the crystalline podium, Admiral Zix's bioluminescent tentacles pulsed with what they probably thought was inspirational vigor but really just made them look like a malfunctioning disco ball. As we gather here today, the Admiral's translator squeaked, we celebrate the achievements of our most diverse class yet. In the front row, James Chen suppressed a yawn, earning him an elbow from his fellow human graduate Michael Rodriguez. Their third companion, Alex Thompson, was actually managing to look interested, probably because they'd had enough coffee to give a rhinoceros heart palpitations. The three humans sat among their alien classmates like boulders in a garden of exotic flowers. While most species in the Galactic Federation evolved on worlds with gravity ranging from 0.3 to 0.8 Earth standard, these Deathworlders came from a planet that might as well have been designed by a sadistic cosmic personal trainer. To their left, a Flaxian cadet, essentially a sentient plant with impressive computational abilities, was literally wilting from boredom. To their right, a cluster of Marians, looking like sophisticated crosses between praying mantises and supercomputers, were sharing disapproving glances at the humans' robust physical forms. Did you see the way they looked at us during physical training? Alex whispered, their words barely audible over Admiral Zix's droning. Like we were going to snap them in half just by breathing too hard. To be fair, Michael muttered back, you did accidentally break that reinforced training dummy. The one rated for level 12 gravity worlds. It was defective. It was titanium alloy, James snorted, drawing more disapproving looks from the surrounding graduates. The Marian's antennae twitched in synchronized annoyance, probably calculating the exact mathematical expression for their disapproval. The ceremony dragged on as various dignitaries took turns at the podium. Aquarian diplomat, whose species resembled nothing so much as a floating collection of geometric shapes, attempted to give an inspiring speech about unity and cooperation. The effect was somewhat undermined by their tendency to split into multiple triangles when excited. The humans' minds wandered to their years at the academy, each remembering the unique challenges they'd faced as the first Earthborn students to attend. There was the time Alex had accidentally terrified their xenobiology professor by explaining what a platypus was, or when James had to demonstrate that yes, humans could actually digest capsaicin without dying. Michael's personal favorite was the day they'd all failed the atmospheric survival test because they'd completed it too quickly. The instructors hadn't believed anyone could function normally in what they considered extreme conditions. And now, Admiral Zix announced, their tentacles rhythmically strobing, we recognize our top graduates. The humans straightened in their seats, not out of pride but because sitting still for so long in 0.4 G was making their muscles cramp. They'd graduated at the top of their class not through any particular academic brilliance, but because they were literally built different. When your species evolved on a death world, certain things just came naturally, like surviving the impossible survival course. Turns out what the Academy considered extreme conditions were just like a mild spring day in Minnesota, or completing the emergency repair practical by simply lifting the damaged shuttle component instead of using the mandatory antigrav units. As they walked across the stage to receive their credentials, they couldn't help but notice the mix of fear, respect, and confusion on their classmates' faces. The Flaxian section had collectively leaned away, their leaves rustling anxiously. The Marian's probability engines were probably overheating trying to compute the likelihood of being hugged. Congratulations, cadets, Admiral Zix said, managing to only flinch slightly when shaking their hands. You've demonstrated unique capabilities. Thank you, Admiral, they responded in unison, carefully modulating their voices to not startle anyone. The rest of the ceremony passed in a blur of speeches, awards, and what the Academy chef had optimistically called multi-species compatible refreshments. The humans had learned early on to bring their own snacks after discovering that most galactic standard rations had the nutritional value of styrofoam to their high metabolism bodies. Later that evening, as the three humans gathered in their shared quarters, the reality of their situation began to sink in. Their room was a testament to their unique status at the academy: reinforced furniture, gravity compensators that never quite worked right, and walls lined with warning signs in multiple languages about the dangers of human-strength coffee. So, Alex said, sprawled across their reinforced bed, standard issue furniture had a nasty habit of collapsing under human weight. Anyone want to bet on how long before they stick us with something ridiculous? James snorted. No bet. They're probably already planning it. Did you see Admiral Zix's expression during the physical training demonstrations? You mean when Sarah from Beta Squad did a handstand in 2G conditions? Michael chuckled. I thought their tentacles were going to tie themselves in knots. Speaking of knots, Alex sat up, reaching for their datapad. Did you guys check our assignments yet? They were supposed to come through right after graduation. James and Michael crowded around the datapad, their expressions shifting from curiosity to disbelief as they read the classified orders that had just arrived. This can't be right, Michael muttered, scrolling through the document again. They want us to what? Report to the Meridian Alliance flagship in 6 hours, Alex read aloud, their voice tinged with a mix of excitement and incredulity. Apparently, they have a special assignment that requires our unique capabilities. Special assignment? James raised an eyebrow. Last time they said that, they had us test experimental armor by letting a Chronaxian battle beast use us as chew toys. That was fun, Michael grinned. The poor thing broke 3 teeth. Still, Alex continued, studying the orders more carefully, this is different. Look at the clearance level. This goes all the way up to high command. The 3 humans exchanged looks, a mixture of anticipation and resignation on their faces. They had spent their entire academic career being the odd ones out, the evolutionary oddities who could survive conditions that would kill most sentient species. Now it seemed the galaxy had finally found a use for their peculiar talents. Well, James stood up, stretching muscles that had grown restless in the Academy's reduced gravity. We better pack. Something tells me this isn't going to be a standard diplomatic mission. When is it ever? Michael laughed, already pulling out their reinforced duffel bags. Remember to pack the good stims this time. The ones that made that Zentarian medical officer faint when they scanned the caffeine content. As they prepared for whatever insanity the galaxy had in store for them, none of the 3 humans could have guessed that they were about to become central figures in ending the longest-running conflict in recent galactic history. The war between the Zillion Empire and the Meridian Alliance had been raging for so long that most species had evolved new appendages just waiting for it to end. Their packing was interrupted by a soft chime from the room's communication panel. A holographic message materialized in the center of the room, displaying the official seal of the Galactic Military Command. Attention graduates Chen, Rodriguez, and Thompson, the message began, the text scrolling in multiple languages. Your presence is required aboard the GFS Improbable within 6 standard hours. Pack for extended deployment in hostile conditions. This message will self-destruct in 30 seconds. Hostile conditions. Alex grinned, already reaching for their reinforced environment suit. Finally, something fun. Your definition of fun needs serious recalibration, James muttered, though he was already packing his own gear with practiced efficiency. Michael, meanwhile, was going through their collection of what they called emergency supplies, a variety of Earth-made items that had caused numerous security alerts at the Academy. Think they'll let us bring the hot sauce this time? After what happened at the xenobiology lab? Not a chance, Alex laughed, remembering the incident that had led to an entire wing being quarantined because someone had mistaken James's ghost pepper sauce for a biological weapon. The humans' reputation preceded them as they boarded the transport to the flagship. Alien crew members gave them a wide berth, their various sensory organs tracking the Deathworlder's movements with a mixture of fear and fascination. Stories of their academic exploits had spread through the ranks like a virus through a first contact scenario. Did you hear? One junior officer whispered to another, their crystalline form vibrating with excitement. They say the tall one bench-pressed a shuttle during maintenance training. That's nothing, their companion replied, antennae twitching. I heard the one with the dark hair survived a direct hit from a plasma cannon during combat simulations. Just walked it off like it was a mild sunburn. The truth, as usual, was somewhere between the rumors and reality. Yes, James had lifted a shuttle, but only the front end, and only because the anti-grav units had failed. And yes, Alex had survived a plasma cannon hit, but that was mostly due to their modified armor and a healthy dose of what they called human stubbornness. As their transport docked with the flagship, the three humans shared a knowing look. Whatever this special assignment was, it was going to be interesting. And in the Galactic Federation, interesting usually meant something between mildly catastrophic and reality-bendingly impossible. The docking procedure completed with a soft hiss of equalizing pressure. Through the viewport, they could see the massive form of the GFS Improbable, its crystalline hull reflecting the light of nearby stars. The ship lived up to its name. It was an experimental vessel, combining technologies from dozens of species into something that shouldn't work but somehow did. Ready? James asked, shouldering his pack. Born ready, Michael replied with a grin. Let's go make some aliens question their life choices, Alex added, leading the way to the airlock. As they stepped aboard the flagship, none of them could shake the feeling that they were about to be thrown into something far bigger than their usual chaos. The war between the Zillion Empire and the Meridian Alliance had been the background noise of their entire academic career, a constant, distant conflict that seemed to have no end in sight. They were about to find out just how wrong that assumption was. The briefing. The war between the Zillion Empire and the Meridian Alliance had been raging for so long that most species had evolved new appendages just waiting for it to end. 10 standard years of conflict over a handful of resource-rich systems had resulted in exactly nothing except expensive light shows and enough paperwork to deforest an entire planet. The briefing room aboard the GFS Improbable hummed with nervous energy as James, Michael, and Alex were led inside by Aquarian escort who had split into so many anxious geometric shapes that they resembled a walking kaleidoscope. The room was packed with high-ranking officers from various species, each looking more concerned than the last. Admiral Krell, their crystalline form dulled from stress, stood at the head of the holographic display table. Graduates, they began, their translator struggling to convey the mix of hope and desperation in their harmonic voice. What do you know about the current war? Other than it being the galaxy's longest-running headache? Alex replied, earning sharp looks from several officers. The Zillions started it by claiming historical rights to the Epsilon cluster based on some ancient space poetry. Poetry that might have been written by a maintenance bot, Michael added. The Meridian Alliance responded with all the diplomatic grace of a sledgehammer to the face, James continued. Their chief negotiator's famous quote was, "Our historical right is that we're historically right here, right now." Admiral Krell's crystalline structure vibrated with what might have been amusement. A simplified version, but essentially correct. What you may not know is how desperate our situation has become. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a complex network of battle lines and resource distributions. The Zillion Empire, represented in pulsing purples and golds, controlled roughly half the disputed territory. Their feared prismatic fleet, ships that could bend light around them in ways that made physics professors wake up screaming, had fought countless battles against the Meridian Alliance's quantum strike force, whose battle tactics involved probability manipulation so complex it gave calculators existential crises. Both sides have reached a technological stalemate, a Marian general explained, their mantis-like form hovering near the display. Our quantum strategies are perfectly countered by their prismatic defenses. Their light-bending attacks are neutralized by our probability shields. We're losing ships, resources, and lives without gaining any ground. The latest peace talks failed spectacularly, added Commander Vix, for 27, their tentacles tied in what appeared to be anxiety knots. The Zillions demanded we acknowledge their historical claims. We demanded they stop demanding. Both sides demanded snacks. Nothing was accomplished. So where do we come in? James asked, studying the tactical display with growing interest. Admiral Krell's form shifted to display what the humans recognized as their version of a serious expression. We have identified a potential weakness in the Zillion defense network. A single planet, designated GL-789, or as they call it. The impenetrable fortress of doom and light refreshments, Michael read from the display. They're not big on subtle names, are they? The hologram zoomed in on a planet that looked like it had been designed by a committee of paranoid porcupines. Orbital defense platforms bristled from every angle, connected by energy fields that could fry a capital ship faster than a human could say, "Oops." This fortress is the keystone of their defense network, Commander Vix, 427 explained. Taking it would force them to the negotiating table. Unfortunately, it's also supposedly impossible to capture. Supposedly. Alex perked up, already grinning. The last 6 assault fleets we sent were converted into modern art installations in the debris field, the commander continued. Very expensive modern art installations. The orbital defenses are impenetrable, the Marian general added. The ground fortifications are unbreachable. And even if you could get past those, the planet's gravity. What about the gravity? James interrupted, suddenly very interested. 2.3 Earth standard, Admiral Krell replied. Which is why we can't deploy most of our ground forces. The atmospheric pressure alone would. The 3 humans exchanged grins that made several junior officers take involuntary steps backward. So let me get this straight, Michael said, leaning forward. You've got a high-gravity planet that nobody can crack because all your troops would be pancakes, orbital defenses that shred anything that gets close, and you need it taken by. He checked his watch, dinner time. That is correct. And you're asking us because. Alex trailed off, already pulling up more tactical data. A Flaxian admiral chittered nervously. Because we've tried everything else. Smart solutions, logical solutions, probability-based solutions. None worked. Ah, James nodded sagely. So now you want a stupid solution. We prefer the term unconventional, Admiral Krell corrected. Permission to be stupidly unconventional, sir. Alex asked, their fingers dancing over the holographic controls. The Admiral's crystalline structure vibrated with what might have been hope or possibly terror. Granted. But please try not to break the planet. The paperwork would be astronomical. The 3 humans huddled together, looking at the target data with expressions that made several commanders reach for their stress relief medications. We'll need some equipment, James said finally. Nothing fancy, just some basic stuff. Like what? Oh, you know, Michael waved vaguely, a shuttle, some environmental suits, maybe a few dozen crates of those energy drinks they banned in 3 sectors for being too potent. And a really good playlist, Alex added. Can't crush an impenetrable fortress without proper background music. The assembled commanders watched in horror as the 3 humans began to plan, their expressions growing more terrifyingly cheerful by the second. This was either going to be brilliantly successful or spectacularly catastrophic. Possibly both. As the briefing concluded, Admiral Krell raised what passed for a hand. One last question. What are your odds of survival? The 3 humans exchanged looks and shrugged simultaneously. About the same as any other day on Earth, James said. Now if you'll excuse us, we have a war to end. They strode out, leaving behind a room full of stunned officers and 1 Quarian who had split into so many worried geometric shapes that they now resembled a modern art installation. The preparation bay of the Meridian flagship looked like someone had let loose a tornado in a military surplus store. In the center of the chaos, 3 humans sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by holographic displays, scattered equipment parts, and enough empty energy drink containers to build a small fortress. Look at this. James pointed at a schematic, his hand practically vibrating from his 8th energy drink. Their orbital defense grid has a refresh rate of 0.3 seconds between firing sequences. That's supposed to be impossible to exploit, commented a Quarian observer who had been assigned to document their methods and possibly prevent them from accidentally blowing up the ship. Impossible is just another word for, hasn't met humans yet, Alex replied, currently upside down against a wall, claiming it helped them think better. Besides, we're not going to exploit it. We're going to completely ignore it. The observers exchanged worried glances. A Marian analyst was frantically calculating the probability of success but kept getting errors because the humans' proposed actions didn't fit any known tactical paradigms. Michael was busy modifying their environmental suits, having stripped off most of the safety regulators. These things are rated for 3G, but if we bypass the limiters and reroute power from the non-essential systems. Define non-essential, Commander Vix, 427 asked nervously. Oh, you know, life support, temperature control, that sort of thing. Those are extremely essential. Not if we're quick enough, James grinned, pulling up more schematics. Besides, we've got backup systems. You mean these? The commander held up what appeared to be primitive oxygen tanks. No, those are for the party afterward. We've got lungs. The observation team watched in horror as the humans systematically violated every safety protocol in the book, then wrote some new ones just to violate those too. Their modified environmental suits now looked less like standard military equipment and more like something out of a deranged engineer's fever dream. What is that? A horrified technician pointed at a device Alex was welding onto their suit. This? It's a music player. Can't work without tunes. And that? The technician pointed at another mysterious attachment. That's classified, Michael said with a straight face. Mainly because we're not sure what it does yet. As the day progressed, the observation team grew increasingly concerned. The humans had created what they called a plan, though it bore about as much resemblance to a standard military strategy as a supernova did to a nightlight. Let me get this straight, Commander Vix, 427 said, tentacles twitching with anxiety. Your plan is to drop in really fast, James began. Hit really hard, Michael continued. Make a lot of noise, Alex added. And improvise from there, they finished in unison. The commander's tentacles tied themselves into a new kind of knot. That's not a plan. That's barely even a suicide mission. Exactly, James beamed. They'll never expect it because no one would be stupid enough to try it. Which makes it brilliant, Michael nodded sagely. Or fatal, muttered the Quarian observer. Same thing, Alex chirped, attaching what appeared to be a primitive projectile weapon to their suit. When questioned about it, they simply said, sometimes you need to solve problems the old-fashioned way. As the humans made their final preparations, testing equipment that shouldn't work, checking modifications that shouldn't exist, and humming tunes that made several aliens' universal translators give up in despair, the observation team came to a disturbing conclusion: these Deathworlders weren't just crazy. They were systematically, methodically, purposefully crazy. And somehow, that was even more terrifying. The galaxy was about to learn why humans were classified as Deathworlders. And it was going to learn fast. The assault. This is crazy. Human squad ready for deployment, James announced over the comm, strapped into their modified shuttle that now had all the safety features of a paper airplane. Please don't call yourselves that, Commander Vix, 427 pleaded from the flagship. Too late. Already printed the t-shirts, Michael replied, queuing up their carefully selected playlist. The preparation bay of the Meridian flagship had been transformed into what the humans affectionately called Chaos Central. Their modified shuttle sat in the center, looking less like a military vessel and more like something cobbled together by caffeinated mechanics with a death wish. Final systems check, Alex called out, running through their pre-launch checklist. Music player. Loaded with Earth's finest pre-battle motivation, Michael confirmed. Everything from AC, DC to Sabaton. Structural integrity. Technically exists, James reported, patting the hull affectionately. Most of it, anyway. Life support. Define support, Michael grinned. In the control room, the observation team watched with a mixture of horror and fascination. The humans had spent the last 6 hours modifying standard equipment in ways that made the engineering team consider early retirement. They removed the inertial dampeners, a Flaxian engineer reported, leaves wilting in distress. Said they were, and I quote, taking the fun out of it. The navigation computer is having an existential crisis, another added. It keeps trying to calculate their trajectory and returning error messages in iambic pentameter. Commander Vic's 427's tentacles had tied themselves into so many knots they resembled a macrame art project. Are you absolutely certain about this approach? Nope, James replied cheerfully. But that's what makes it perfect. Nobody expects a plan this stupid to actually work. It's like my grandmother used to say, Alex added, making final adjustments to their modified environmental suit. If something's worth doing, it's worth doing with style and a questionable regard for personal safety. Your species is terrifying, the commander muttered. Thank you. The shuttle's modifications were a testament to human ingenuity and their unique approach to problem solving. They had stripped away anything they deemed unnecessarily safe and reinforced what remained with materials that made the engineering team check their material science textbooks. Remember, Michael said, going through their equipment one last time, once we hit the atmosphere, we'll have exactly 47 seconds before either our brilliant plan works. Or we become a very expensive crater, James finished. Just like training simulations back home. You had training simulations like this? No, but we had this thing called sledding that's basically the same principle. Just with more snow and fewer orbital defense systems. The launch countdown began, and the observation team watched as the humans performed their final pre-mission rituals. Alex adjusted their music playlist, Michael double-checked their modified weapons, and James distributed what they called victory snacks. Sir, a junior officer reported to Commander Vic's, 427, the humans are singing. Indeed, the 3 Deathworlders had broken into what they called their lucky song, a centuries-old Earth battle hymn about a highway to somewhere hot. Launch in T-minus 60 seconds, the automated system announced. In the shuttle, the humans did one final equipment check. Their modified environmental suits looked like something out of a mad scientist's garage sale. Standard safety features had been replaced with what they called fun buttons, and each suit was equipped with enough backup systems to make redundancy feel redundant. Remember, Alex said, pulling up the tactical display, we hit atmosphere at Mark 7, cut through the orbital grid at Mark 8, and hopefully land somewhere around Mark 9. Defined land, James asked. Successfully transition from moving very fast vertically to moving very fast horizontally while avoiding sudden deceleration trauma. Ah, crashing with style. Exactly. Launch in T-minus 30 seconds. The observation team watched as the humans' modified shuttle was moved into position. Several engineers were praying to various deities, while others were updating their wills. You know, Michael mused, checking their harness, if this works, we're going to completely rewrite the military tactical manual. And if it doesn't, James added, we'll at least make a really impressive explosion. Win-win situation. Launch in T-minus 10 seconds. Commander Vic's, 427 made one final attempt at reason. Are you absolutely sure about this? The human's response came in perfect unison, nope. 5, 4, 3. Alex's fingers danced over the controls, disabling the last few safety protocols that the system had been desperately trying to maintain. 2, 1. For Earth, coffee, and questionable decisions. James declared. Launch. The shuttle shot out of the bay like a caffeine-powered projectile, immediately ignoring every known law of sensible space travel. The humans' modified engines, running on what they called spite and optimism, pushed the vessel to speeds that made physics textbooks spontaneously combust. In the Zillion Defense Command Center, alarms started blaring. "Sir, we have an incoming vessel," a junior officer reported. "Trajectory, it appears to be falling." "What do you mean, falling?" "Like, literally falling. No attempted evasion, no defensive maneuvers, just falling really fast while playing something called Highway to Hell." The Zillion commander stared at the readouts. "That's impossible. Nobody would be that stupid." Meanwhile, in the falling shuttle, the humans were having the time of their lives. "Hey guys," Alex called out over the sound of metal screaming against atmospheric entry, "remember that part of the plan where we were supposed to hit Mark 7? Yeah. We just hit Mark 8. Whoops." The shuttle blazed through the sky like a meteor having an existential crisis. The orbital defense grid, designed to target ships trying to survive, completely failed to recognize the humans' descent as an attack. After all, who would classify falling with style as a military strategy? "Sir." The Zillion officer was practically hopping with anxiety. "They're going to hit the ground in approximately 47 seconds. Good, that will solve our problem for us. They're aiming for the reinforced landing pad. Even better. That's the strongest point of our." Boom. The impact shook the entire facility. Where there had been a reinforced landing pad rated for capital ships, there was now a crater containing one slightly crushed shuttle and 3 laughing humans. "Like a glove," Alex declared, kicking open the shuttle door. "Status report?" James asked, checking his modified suit. "Everything hurts and I'm having the time of my life," Michael responded, grabbing their equipment. The Zillion security forces, trained for every possible scenario except humans being humans, found themselves facing 3 Deathworlders who had just survived a crash that should have turned them into atoms. "Surrender," a guard ordered through their translator. "No thanks, we're good," James replied casually, walking forward in 2.3G like he was taking a stroll in the park. "Anyone know where the main control room is? We're trying to end a war here." The security team opened fire. Energy beams designed to incapacitate any known species splashed harmlessly off the humans' modified suits. "Rude," Michael commented, pulling out what looked like a primitive projectile weapon. "Guess we're doing this the fun way. Did you remember to pack the non-lethal rounds?" Alex asked, already moving towards the nearest cover. "Of course. These will just hurt a lot." The Zillion guards, realizing their energy weapons were useless, began to fall back. Unfortunately for them, they were trying to retreat in 2.3G gravity. The humans, on the other hand, were moving like they were on a pleasant jog. "You know," James said, casually vaulting over a defensive barrier that was supposed to be impossible to scale, "I'm starting to think they don't want us here." "What gave it away?" Alex laughed, using their modified suit's strength enhancers to pick up and throw aside a security drone. "The shooting or the screaming?" "Probably the screaming," Michael replied, firing several rounds of what they called friendship pellets at a group of guards. The non-lethal projectiles had enough force to send the alien sprawling but not enough to cause serious harm. Though to be fair, we get that reaction a lot. The humans moved through the facility like a force of nature, their modified suits allowing them to shrug off everything from energy weapons to gravity itself. The Zillion defenders, used to fighting enemies who relied on technology and tactical probability, had no protocol for dealing with 3 caffeine-powered Deathworlders who treated their impenetrable defenses like a mildly interesting obstacle course. "According to the schematics," Alex said, consulting their tactical display while casually dodging another barrage of energy fire, "the main control room should be 3 levels down." "Race you there?" Michael suggested. "Winner buys drinks after." "Deal." The observation team aboard the Meridian flagship watched in stunned silence as the humans' helmet cameras transmitted their progress. Commander Vic's 427's tentacles had become so tangled they needed help from 2 junior officers to untie them. They're singing," a Marian analyst reported in disbelief. Indeed, the humans had broken into what they called their working song, a cheerful tune about another highway to somewhere warm, as they systematically dismantled the fortress's internal defenses. "Sir," a Flaxian officer reported to Admiral Krell, "the Zelians are requesting emergency communication. They're asking what in the name of probability we sent into their fortress." "Tell them," the Admiral replied, their crystalline form vibrating with what might have been amusement, "that it's just 3 recent graduates doing their best to be helpful." The humans had reached the lower levels of the fortress, leaving behind a trail of disabled security systems, thoroughly confused guards, and what appeared to be empty energy drink containers. "You know," James said, using their suit's enhanced strength to pry open a sealed blast door, "I'm starting to think their impenetrable fortress wasn't designed with humans in mind." "To be fair," Alex replied, already halfway through hacking the next security checkpoint, "most things in the galaxy weren't designed with humans in mind. That's what makes it fun." "Speaking of fun," Michael called out, "incoming heavy security team. And are those quantum-locked gravitational manipulators." "Boo, fancy." James grinned. "Want to see who can disable the most?" The observation team watched in horror and fascination as the 3 humans turned what should have been a desperate last stand into something they called a point-scoring competition. "That's 12 for me," Alex announced, using their modified suit systems to short out another manipulator. 14. Michael countered, their non-lethal rounds proving surprisingly effective against quantum technology. 15, James said calmly, having figured out that the devices had an exploitable weakness against being hit really hard with improvised projectiles. They were 3 levels deep into the impenetrable fortress, surrounded by disabled security systems and unconscious guards, and they were treating it like a game. The galaxy was learning, perhaps too late, why humans had earned their reputation as Deathworlders. And they weren't done yet. The final push. Status update. Commander Vix, 427 asked, their tentacles twisted into shapes that defied geometry. "Well," Alex's voice crackled over the comm, punctuated by what sounded like explosions and, was that laughter? "We're 3 levels down, security systems are mostly disabled, and James just set a new personal record for throwing people in high gravity." 17. James called out in the background. "Though I'm not counting the ones who surrendered as soon as they saw us coming." The command center of the Meridian flagship had become an impromptu viewing gallery. Officers from multiple species crowded around the tactical displays, watching in disbelief as 3 humans systematically dismantled what was supposed to be the most secure facility in known space. "Sir," a Marian analyst reported, their probability engine smoking slightly, "the Zelians have begun broadcasting on all frequencies. They're demanding to know what kind of monsters we've sent into their fortress." "Tell them," Admiral Krell replied, their crystalline form shimmering with barely contained amusement, "that they're not monsters. They're humans." "That's worse," came the immediate response. Inside the fortress, the 3 Deathworlders had reached what appeared to be the main security hub. Screens lined the walls, showing various parts of the facility where confused guards were still trying to figure out what had hit them. "Check this out," Michael said, pointing to one of the displays. "They've got their own cafeteria. With actual coffee machines." "Focus," James reminded them, though he was also eyeing the coffee machines with interest. "We're here to end a war, not raid their break room. Can't we do both?" "Later." "Alex, how's that hack coming along?" Alex was plugged into the main console, their fingers dancing over holographic controls while simultaneously humming what they called their hacking song. "Good news and bad news. Good news is, I've got access to their main systems. Bad news is, they've got some serious quantum encryption on the core controls." "How serious?" "Well, according to this, it would take their most advanced AI about 10,000 years to crack it." "And how long will it take you?" Alex grinned. "About 5 minutes. They forgot to change the default admin password. It was password 123 in Zillion." The observation team aboard the flagship watched in stunned silence as the humans continued their improbable assault. Aquarian officer had split into so many geometric shapes of disbelief that they were now technically a new form of abstract art. Sir, a junior officer reported to Commander Vix, for 27, we're picking up unusual energy signatures from the fortress. It appears the humans are they making coffee? Priorities, Michael's voice came over the comm, can't end a war without proper caffeine. The main control room was just ahead, protected by what the Zelians called their ultimate defense system. It was a series of overlapping energy fields, gravity wells, and quantum-locked barriers that, according to all known physics, should have been impossible to breach. So, James said, studying the defenses while sipping from a freshly acquired coffee cup, what are we thinking? Standard approach? You mean hit it really hard until something breaks? Alex asked. That's our standard approach. Has been since we discovered fire, Michael confirmed, already pulling out what looked suspiciously like primitive explosives. Though I've got something special for this one. Please tell me those aren't the same ones you used during the xenobiology practical. Nah, these are better. Remember that chemistry project I was working on? The one that got banned in 7 sectors. 8 now, actually. Turns out it works really well against quantum barriers. The humans set up their equipment with the casual efficiency of people who had spent far too much time breaking things that were supposed to be unbreakable. Their modified suits, now sporting several new battle scars and what appeared to be coffee cup holders, were still functioning perfectly in the high gravity. Ready? Alex asked, finger hovering over the detonator. Born ready, James replied. Wait, Michael held up a hand. Need the right music for this. The sound of ancient Earth rock music filled their comms as Michael queued up what they called their Breaking Physics playlist. Now. The explosion was unique. Later attempts to describe it would include phrases like reality hiccuped and probability took a coffee break. When the quantum dust settled, there was a perfectly human-sized hole in the ultimate defense system. James observed, peering through the breach. That worked better than expected. Is anyone else's reality slightly sideways? Michael asked. Nah, that's just the coffee kicking in. They stepped through the breach to find themselves in the fortress's main control center. The room was massive, filled with holographic displays and control panels that controlled everything from orbital defenses to, apparently, the facility's hot beverage dispensers. It was also filled with very surprised Zillion commanders. Hi there. Alex waved cheerfully. Don't suppose you'd be interested in surrendering? We've had a long day, and we're running low on coffee. The Zillion High Commander, their quantum feathers bristling with indignation, drew themselves up to their full height. This is impossible. Our defenses are perfect. Our systems are unbreakable. Yeah, Michael interrupted, casually disabling another security drone. We get it. You're very impressive. Now, about that surrender. Never. We will never submit to. James sighed, reached over, and picked up what appeared to be a heavily reinforced desk. In 2.3G. With one hand. Look, he said, holding the desk like it was made of paper, we can do this the easy way, or we can keep breaking your stuff. Your choice. The observation team watched as the Zillion commanders huddled together, their quantum feathers flickering with rapid calculations. Finally, the High Commander turned back to the humans. What are your terms? Oh, nothing fancy, Alex said, already working on the main control console. Just need you to stop this whole war thing. It's getting kind of old. But our historical claims. Tell you what, Michael proposed, how about instead of fighting over who owned these systems first, you try sharing them? Novel concept, we know, but it's worked pretty well for us. Sharing? The concept seemed to physically pain the Zillion commander. Yeah, like civilized species. James was still holding the desk, though now he was using it as an impromptu seat. Plus, think of all the money you'll save on not having to rebuild fortresses we break. The Zelians exchanged looks that suggested they were seriously reconsidering their life choices. Finally, the High Commander deflated slightly. Perhaps we could discuss terms. Excellent. Alex beamed, already pulling up communication channels. Admiral Krell. Commander Vix, 427. You might want to get those peace treaties ready. We've got some very reasonable Zelians here who'd love to talk. The next few hours were a blur of diplomatic communications, treaty drafts, and what the humans called victory coffee. They had not only breached the unbreachable fortress but had managed to do it while keeping property damage to what they considered a reasonable minimum. You know, Michael mused, watching as Meridian and Zillian diplomats began their discussions, this went better than expected. Indeed, agreed a Zillian officer who had warmed up to the humans after they fixed the coffee machine they'd accidentally broken. Though I must ask, was all this really necessary? The crash landing? The explosions? The singing? Necessary? No, James grinned. Fun. Absolutely. Your species is terrifying. We get that a lot, Alex nodded sagely. But look on the bright side, at least now you've got a great story to tell at diplomatic functions. As the day drew to a close, the three humans sat in what remained of the fortress's cafeteria, surrounded by empty coffee cups and thoroughly impressed aliens. Mission accomplished? Michael asked. War ended, minimal casualties, maximum property damage, James counted off on his fingers. I'd say that's a success. Plus, Alex added, we got to keep the coffee machine. The galaxy had learned several important lessons that day. First, that impossible was just a word that hadn't met humans yet. Second, that sometimes the best solution wasn't the most elegant one. And third, that giving humans coffee in a high-gravity environment was either the best or worst decision in military history, depending on which side you were on. But most importantly, they learned why humans were classified as Deathworlders. It wasn't just their physical capabilities or their ability to survive in extreme conditions. It was their unique combination of ingenuity, audacity, and what they called calculated recklessness that made them truly formidable. That, and their concerning ability to turn anything into an impromptu weapon, including their own terrible ideas.